Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Good Life Meditation for the 21st day of February 2018. So, had an interesting day. It's yesterday. It was a very productive day, and it's really interesting how the more time I spend doing this actual activity of going over my objectives and principles out loud to the camera with the knowledge that I'm going to upload it, the more deeply these things seem to intertwine into my day. There's an immediacy to the principles in particular, things like temperance and apathy, and objectives like the good use of time, that is right there. It's like having, if you're a gunslinger, it's the difference between having your weapon holstered with the strap on and maybe underneath your coat. You can't quite get to it. Maybe you forget it's even there. Versus standing out in the open, on the street, facing down the opponent with the coat pulled back, the safety thing off, and your hands hovering over the weapon with fingers twitching in the air, ready to draw. Even if you're not actually conscious of doing that all the time, as the day goes by, when things happen, the principles are there, the objectives are there, and I'm astonished by here comes this guy, he's coming over. I'm astonished by how readily these things are becoming apparent, so I'm encouraged to keep this up. So let's get on with it. So my this is my daily activity to remind myself of my objectives and principles to help me stay in good alignment throughout the day. Look at that sunrise as I move forward. So I better get on with it. 6 objectives. The first is to be always ready to die. Curious thing, yesterday I was corresponding the last couple of days with an 82-year-old gentleman, and he kind of indicated to me, and I was impressed with his matter-of-fact tone on his email, that he kind of senses the end of his life, and the way that, even though I only spoke with him briefly via email, I was impressed by the fact of it, that it was on his mind. And I'm going to talk to him today. I'm going to call him during my lunch break today, and I look forward to chatting with him and learning more. But that's the kind of what I'm talking about, is to be aware that death is an opportunist and could come for me at any moment, and am I ready to die? So just jump a little deeper into that. Yesterday I mentioned that there were 3 domains I was concerned about. My financial household, was my household in order, and second is my relationships, and third is my avocation, the things that I do to make my life worthwhile beyond work and family. And I mentioned that I still have some work to do on the financial element, in particular getting good disability insurance in case something happens to me, to ensure that my family is in good shape. I have insurance through work, but it's not sufficient to cover us completely or for a very long time. So I haven't made the appointment yet, but I talked to my family about this yesterday. That was great. Over dinner we talked about this subject, and we all agreed that I'm going to make an appointment for tomorrow with our insurance agent to discuss some options. So I was happy with that. In terms of relationships with my family, I'm in good shape with that. Probably work a little better with my mom. How about she's difficult sometimes to. There's challenges to having a good relationship. So I tried the best I can, but I get to work better on that. And and with regard to my avocation, the things I like to do, you bet, there's Green River over there. That's where I stop for coffee every day on the way home. Next, and boy, I spent a lot of time on this. I got to move fast. I have only like 23 minutes to do this whole thing because I start at the same place every day. So next is the good and effective use of time, and making sure that I'm letting my minutes, attending to my minutes rather than letting my minutes pass. And I'm really doing a good job of that lately. I really have cut out the filler activities of my life. Watching videos on YouTube, for example, that are nothing more than gossipy, following along with, stuff that's kind of stimulating in a Kardashian type of a voyeuristic way that really doesn't add any depth to my life other than entertainment. And I'm not saying entertainment is bad, but I'd rather be doing things that are more enriching and fulfilling. And so I'm rediscovering lectures and TED Talks and Big Think and podcasts and very good things. I'm really pleased with my use of time. Also being more attentive to my family. I'm a little concerned I'm spending more time on Facebook again like I used to, and I've got to balance that. That's not a good use of time. I don't want to spend too much time on Facebook. I want to make that a conduit for my own personal sharing, almost like a bulletin board of where I can share my thoughts. And if that sounds, selfish, well, that's what it is. I don't want to use Facebook. I don't want to use Facebook as an interactive forum. I'd rather use it as a place to share what interests me and what I'm up to in my creative activities. So next is 3 is the development and maintenance of good sound life principles. That's what I'm doing right now. Let's talk about one of those. How about number 6, which is I've already gone through the 6. Let's go on to the principles. Let's evaluate number 1. No, actually I did that too. Or 2, reason. I did that one too last week. Let's go on to 3, which is the homunculus. Is it worthwhile to remind myself of this idea of the homunculus every day? That there's a fictitious little man that lives in my head. I think so, because it takes away the illusion that there's something magical or mystical to what I am, because there's no good reason to think that's the case. If someone demonstrates a good reason to think that that's the case, then I'll change my tune. But as long as that's the case, and I remind myself that my consciousness will apparently wink out just as my gallbladder will stop functioning, and at the same time when I die, then that's a good thing to remember. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile and it's a sound principle. So that was number 3, the development and maintenance of good sound life principles, and an example of examining one of those. And I do that every day. I try to move through my 6 and 20 in turn, asking myself, is that a good thing to do, is work to keep? Next, number 4, the cultivation of good emotional reactions. Trying to make myself into a person who does not fly off the handle outwardly, and getting more and more the case inwardly as well. It used to be that I'd have to hold it in like a firecracker going off in a Coke can, and hold my hand over the lid and pow, and ow, that hurts. But now it's more and more, it's like trying to keep the firecracker from going off altogether. Like, put some water in there and dump the firecracker in, it won't go off. Sure, maybe it holds on to some latent energy, but I found that I can, by attending to that, asking myself in a moment of a moment of time off from work or whatever, break, ask myself, what was that all about? Where did that come from? And then to attend to it that way. Yeah. Next is the performance of good actions, just doing good things throughout the day. I like to try to make the day a string of virtuous activities, things that make the world better. Picking up trash, holding the door, speaking nice to people, a genuine smile, maintaining an attentive gaze and an attentive aspect, actually keeping my attention on people who are speaking to me and actually listening to what they're saying rather than getting ready to formulate my response, even if that means I have to have a little break in the conversation as I formulate my response. These things are what I mean by doing good things throughout the day. Next, the recognition of true limits and opportunity. And I thought of a new one that I'd like to go over. My time, my weekday when I'm at work, I have a real limit in that I need to work 9 hours. Well, in fact, 7.9 hours, because I get a 1 hour break, and I get a 2 20-minute breaks. So I think that boils down to actual 7.9 hours of actually attentive work. That is a limit, because that's time that I can't be spending doing my creative things or talking to my family or working on self-improvement or whatever the case may be, entertainment, leisure, anything like that. I have to be working. And it is a limit, because I'd rather be doing those other things. But it's also an opportunity, because this is a time for me to muster my resources to make sure that I'm being attentive to my work during that time. It's self-discipline, and that strength can then be recycled elsewhere in life. And I do that by when I sit down in the morning at work, first thing I do while my computer's starting up is I get out a pad of paper and I list out all the things that I need to do that day, and I check them off through the day. Hey, come on in. Give him a flash in my bright so he can come on over. There we go. So I try to do it if he'll flash me. Sometimes they do. Truckers do that. So, like I know anything about truckers. So, yeah. So but so it's a limit and an opportunity. Let's get on to my 20 principles now. First is the principle of war. To wake each morning, gird myself, not girdle. A completely different mental image. Gird myself with the weapons and instruments of my war, reason, honesty, and objectivity, and go to war with everything that I hold dear. In particular, anything that might be a belief that I have, that I maintain, because it comforts me, but hasn't suffered the gauntlet of examination to reveal if it's true. I don't want to have anything that is just like cotton candy on the shelf, just fluff and pretty, but of no real substance. Unless that cotton candy can reveal itself. That's a terrible example, because cotton candy has substance. But it's principles. Anything. I don't want to believe things on faith, dogma, authority, or tradition. They need to stand up on their own 2 feet in the stark face of objective observation. And if it can't suffer the scrutiny of objective observation, then it's not a real thing, because it's not in the real world. If it's something that's supernatural, then by nature it can't be observed, and we can't know anything about it. So it doesn't qualify as something to be believed. Now, number 2, and I kind of covered this already too, is my reason is the instrument of that war, and the sub-principles of honesty and objectivity. I think I just kind of talked about that just now, saying that that's what I use to determine if something is true. So I think I've covered that enough. 3, the homunculus. I mentioned that before. That's the one we examined. And homunculus is just a word, not a made-up word. It's a real word describing a little human, a little person, be inside your head. If you had a latch on your head, you could open your head, you'd see a little man. Remember in what was it? The Men in Black. That one alien. There was a little man inside. That would be a homunculus. And I remind myself that my consciousness is like that. It's not really a homunculus, but it's like that. And that little man will suffocate and die the moment that my body stops functioning. That's a good example. That's a good way to describe it, because the brain will suffocate and die when my heart stops. Now, so no soul, apparently, no afterlife, no eternity, none of that. Now, number 4, the home of good and evil. I just watched a great TED Talk. It's an old one, and it's an oldie but goodie. This is an example of good use of time. I was rewatching a TED Talk with Sam Harris about how science can help us determine right and wrong, breaking it down to having objective views on what constitutes good. And everything that I've always said about, good and bad, being able to break those down to objective well-being of conscious creatures, I really did leverage that from Mr. Harris. And so those ideas don't seem to exist out there in the world. They're not granted to us by some heavenly being. They're opinions that we have, that we develop through our experience and through our cultural upbringing, and we hold on to them. And the danger is that if we think that there's something absolute about them, then there's no room to change. But if we realize that these things are, that good and evil are opinions and ideas that we hold in our minds with the homunculus, so to speak, then we have room to change. So if we disagree with somebody, instead of coming to blows, we can come to words and work out a reasonable agreement about what constitutes good, bad, and the like. Next, purpose. For me, it's clear biology has a mandate for me to survive and to make more of myself, to see my children to maturity, and then once they're good and on their way to die and get the heck out of the way and make room for others. It seems to be a system there, and it doesn't seem to be a system that requires any authorship or oversight of a creator. It seems that the system makes sense in a developing, evolving environment where life gets steadily more complex from simple forms, and it makes sense that whatever allows that life to perpetuate is a virtue. And so that seems to be the one objective mandate of nature for life, is to live, to survive it, to make more of ourselves. Outside of that, I don't see any others, so I elect to make my own. And my purpose, besides having a baby, is to be a good man, where good is defined as a virtuous man, and virtue is the objective improvement of well-being for conscious creatures. Well, I would probably extend that to all life, because if plants flourish, I don't think they're conscious, but if they flourish, then we flourish as well. We won't flourish for very long if unconscious plants don't do well. Now, next is 6, atomic principle. Everything is made of bits and pieces, and so too you and me. And when we die, those bits and pieces will fall apart and will be reused for something else. And it's just good to remember that. The principle next is principle 7, principle of nature. Everything in the universe has some nature, and it's good to recognize what that nature is. For example, it's the nature of February to be cold as it was yesterday. Not so bad today, and so it's good for me to recognize that nature and to prepare by bringing appropriate warm or cold weather gear, clothing in my motorcycle, which I didn't do yesterday, but I did today, and I'm feeling much better. Next is principle of maturity. Maturity is that state that we arrive at typically later in life when we've had lots of experience, and we're able to remember that experience and then apply it to a better ends. To do that, we need to have wisdom, which is the very fact of the experience of trial and error, what we learned along the way, we've collected along the way, and then fortitude, which is our willingness and ability to push on towards the better ends that we perceive through wisdom. Next is social principle. Being social animals, it's good for us to engage in things that promote the common good. Yesterday I mentioned that I'm not too interested in cultivating friendships anymore. That may seem rather unsocial, but in fact it's really more related to the good use of time. I was thinking about it a little more, and it seems that sometimes what we often do when we're huddled together with friends is we're really comforting each other and entertaining each other from our pain and our fears and our loneliness. And it's a funny thing, since I've become interested in going alone into wild places all alone, where fear, loneliness, and pain are all out there, and I found great reward in doing so. I wonder if that's connected to the fact that I don't really want that comfort anymore of that friendships. I'll kill Flipper for a tuna sandwich. Nice. Humpty Dumpty, whatever. It's interesting. That must be a fisherman. I'm reading the bumper stickers, and it's interesting that I wonder if that's a connection. The fact that going alone is and the reward of that is somehow related to my disinterest in having friends anymore. And it's interesting, someone mentioned in comments yesterday about the word antisocial. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that word doesn't necessarily apply here. I think it's something else. Now, next, got to move on, is the Feast of Offal, all the waste and byproduct of our unprincipled, undisciplined life that spills out from us, and we get mad at other people, or even sarcastic, or show our upset, and it catches. It's like a flu bug spreading around the office, and everybody gets it, and then they get their offal flying all over the place, and before long everybody's miserable. So what I try to do is to contain that myself, and to not consume it when others give it out, and kind of it's like walking around with a surgical mask on my mouth all day, but not towards germs and viruses, but towards anger, frustration, upset, and all these uncontrolled passions that flow around. It's a curious thing, including happiness and joy. Not to go overboard with those too. It's not just negative stuff. It's positive. It's keeping an even temper and maintaining our equanimity throughout the day. And it gets easier with practice. Next, I've got 10 more to do and only like 2 off-ramps, so I'll go quick. Number 10 is Temperance, is the controlled consumption of all things. The sub-principles are simplicity, suffering, and apathy, but not in that order. Hey, there's another BMW rider. What if that's the guy that talked to me yesterday at Starbucks? He said he sees me sometimes. So next, and suffering, because we suffer when we deny ourselves what we want. Simplicity, because living a simple life is a temperate life. And apathy, because when we can recognize what's outside of our control, we are not bothered so much by those things that are outside of our control. So now moving along to number 12, agency and the great indifference. We're all agents, anything that's alive. Take out the life, the surface of Mars probably, and the surface of the moon, the depths of outer space. It's all indifferent. There's no life out there. It doesn't give a damn. There doesn't seem to be any great spirit floating through the stars that looks down and cares upon us. That if there is, it's doing a great job of hiding. And people that claim that it's just something you got to feel inside, I don't believe you. I think you're making that up. You gotta do a better job than that. And so if that's the case, then the universe doesn't seem to care. Then if we want to have love, compassion, tenderness, peace, fraternity, sorority, whatever the case may be, then we have to turn to one another. It's the antidote to going alone. Next is the best seat in the house, to not want to be anywhere else, or be doing anything else, but to be okay with just who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing. Next is the risk of avoiding risk. There's 2 levels of risk in life, the surface level stuff and the deep risks. The hippies were onto something when they said that you need to be looking after that deeper level stuff. The problem is they went too far that way, and they forgot about the surface level risks of security, education, and family, and they wound up maybe very satisfied artistically, but not very secure, not very comforted, and not very well situated in life. So I recommend attending to both in a particular order. In the decade of the 20s, go as far as you can with education, and when that's done, it will take you to 25, 26, get your master's degree if possible, or further if you can. But I like to give that last 5 years over to adventure. From 25 to 30, just go out and experience the world, have a great life adventure, become make lots of mistakes, maybe take some risks, maybe come close to dying a couple of times, and when you're done, then you can take that education and that experience and settle down to a career, find someone fascinating to spend your life with, make a family, and enjoy the rest of your life. I think you'll be more satisfied in the long run for that investment. It's a rare person that can do both. I certainly was unable to do so. I attended like more hippies. I attended more to the deep level stuff than the surface level stuff. Now I gotta go fast. Sin and damnation. The 5 sins in my worldview: falsity, credulity, faith, superstition, and dogma. They're all the same thing. They're all a willingness to believe or believing in something without good reason, and that's damnable, because I think you live in a damned world when you are operating with under false pretense, under false beliefs, accepting things just because they give you comfort. Next is complete oblivion. When we die, it appears that nothing survives. Our atoms and molecules go on, but we're gone. Who we are. The homunculus winks out that emergent quality of consciousness that we are. And if that's the case, then there will be no reunion with those who passed before or who will follow after we die. No chance to reconcile our differences, and there'll be no final justice, because it appears there is no God out there, gods to dispense justice to those who are deserving of the justice or reward. So we have to attend those things now. Seek after reunion with those that we've fallen away from during life. Try to cultivate reconciliation with those who we have problems with during life, and seek after justice where justice is required during life. Now, almost done here. The great life adventure, as I was saying before, typically in the 20s, adventure out to have adventure, to experience life, and to make your the dreams that you have about what you'd want to do come true, but whether it be living in a foreign country, taking up a curious hobby, learning a new language, spending time with exotic people, whatever the case may be. And if you're not so inclined to do that things, that's okay as well. There are people who are not interested in that, and that's fine. I recommend that if you are interested in that, and if you don't do that, you're going to regret it later, and it's hard to catch up. But if you do it, that'll pay dividends throughout your life. And I like to say that it will probably make you into what I like to call the most interesting person at the cocktail party. Lots of stories, lots of character, lots of background and interest, and basically a fascinating individual. Now, almost done. So, and you can give your peppier later life with great life adventures as well. I like to do that every 2 weeks. Next is the season of philosophy. As you live life, especially if you live life in the way you want to. With giving yourself that great life adventure, you're going to have moments where you have a reflection, where you might have an opportunity to relate what you've learned, to share it in words. And I recommend write it down what I call it the muse. When the muse speaks, which is just our creative energy, when the muse speaks, record what the muse is saying, and because when the moment passes, the moment does pass, and you probably won't have that chance again. What your muse says in your 20s probably won't be the same thing that it'll say in your 30s and 40s and 50s. So record it down. And the worst thing of all is if you wait too long and you're really get any old, or a tragic disability happens and you can't record it anymore, even though you've still got the words in your head. What a tragedy that would be, to have the muse speaking in your mind while your body is no longer able to record it. Like, for example, if a severe stroke happens, or you're so laid up with a disabling disease like cancer that you don't have the energy to do it. And it's a tragedy that moment will pass, and your opportunity to share, look at that guy, will be gone. So record when the muse speaks. Take a moment to set aside. I always keep a pen and pencil. Now I record it simply on my softypapa blog Facebook page. And lately I've been doing it right on Facebook page directly, which is that's a risk. Now, last one is arena and utility. Life is an arena for the execution of our objectives and development and execution of our objectives and principles, which hang like tools on a tool belt. That's the utility part, and are there for our use as we need them through the day. So as I go through life in this building behind me, through the day, and I have opportunities, is this a chance for me to be temperate, or to be it's another good one. I usually use the same ones over and over again. Social, to be another one. To be social, to look after social good. Go out to lunch with my coworkers, even if I'd rather stay and hang out by myself, or maybe it's a chance to recognize the benefits of agency, and to have some fraternity time with my friends, my coworkers. All these types of things, they just hang there. And the more I remember them, the more I do this, the more chance they are that they're there for me to use when I need them. Well, with that, I'll stop, and I wish you all the best. Have a good day. Make it a great day and a good life. Take care.